When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
you die. There is no middle ground.
Welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be talking about two different specific topics. One of them was, did Tywin know about the Purple Wedding happening before it actually happened? Was he involved in it at all? And two, did he actually know that Tyrion was innocent the entire time and chose to let Tyrion be the fall guy? So again, two topics kind of related, but they are separate topics. So let's start with the first one. Largely, the idea of Tywin knowing about the Purple Wedding comes from the idea of Tywin being a very smart person. He plays the game really well, and Tywin had all of the motivation to want to get rid of Joffrey. But the question is, did he? And that's a tough question because I think the issue that rises with that is I think in the show, with these theories, I think the version of Charles Dance works a bit better. I think in the book, I just don't think that's the case. Tywin is someone that deeply cares about, appearances and how his family is shaped. If somebody can poison the king on his wedding day at the height of the Lannister power, it shows weakness within the Lannister ranks. And so you think about, for instance, Tywin hates Tyrion more than anyone in his family, but think about what he does in Book 1. When Tyrion is captured, Tywin basically launches a war, right? And so take that now to Joffrey, who is the king. He is basically he is the Lannister power. He also is not coming into his rulership for another couple of years, so Tywin still has time to maybe try and mold Joffrey, or at least find a different solution down the road if it gets to that point. You also have to think of, is Tywin willing to risk the Tyrell alliance? Yes, it's still very likely the Tyrells would have married into the Lannisters regardless. We see that with Tommen, or maybe even with Jaime, as we'll see later on when we talk about the idea of Tyrion being innocent and Tywin knowing all of that. It'll factor more into that part of the video, but in terms of him actually executing the Purple Wedding or allowing it to happen, I just don't think there's a lot of evidence for it. The only evidence that I found that I think is of note is this quote we get in A Storm of Swords when they're talking about Joffrey as a king and the influence of Robert on him. So I'm going to read off this quote. We'll kind of talk about it afterwards and we'll break all that down. Yes, I recall now, Cersei said. Robert often told Joff that a king must be bold. And what were you telling him, pray? I did not fight a war to seat Robert II on the Iron Throne. You gave me to understand the boy cared nothing for his father. Why would he? Robert ignored him. He would have beat him if I'd allowed it. That brute you made me marry once hit the boy so hard he knocked out 2 of his baby teeth over some mischief with a cat. I told him I'd kill him in his sleep if he ever did it again, and he never did. But sometimes he would say things. It appears things needed to be said. Lord Tywin waved 2 fingers at her, a brusque dismissal. Go. She went seething. Not Robert II, Tyrion said. Aerys III. The boy is 13. There is time yet. Lord Tywin paced to the window. That was unlike him. He was more upset than he wished to show. He requires a sharp lesson. Tyrion had gotten his own sharp lesson at 13. He felt almost sorry for his nephew. On the other hand, no one deserved it more. Enough of Joffrey, he said. Wars are won with quills. So again, there is some at the end of that would suggest Tywin was planning on trying to make Joffrey see his way of thinking or to change him. Some have gone as far as suggesting that this meant that Tywin was going to teach him a lesson by killing him. Now, I just don't think that is necessarily the case. But I think that, yes, there is some concern here. Tywin is trying to understand how can he secure, his legacy with Joffrey on the throne. Joffrey is not somebody that's going to be able to continue this dynasty. Like Tyrion suggests, he's more like an heiress, right? And when Tywin goes, who's going to be around Joffrey, right? So Tywin has a lot to do. He needs to separate Cersei from Joffrey. He needs to figure out how to shape Joffrey to be a ruler. He also wants to get Jaime to be the ruler of Casterly Rock. In a lot of ways, we know that the war is kind of winding down. Robb Stark's campaign is dwindling at this point. Tywin, even as it kind of suggests, wars are won with quills. Already the Red Wedding is kind of birthing itself at this point. The war is kind of wrapping itself up. And so Tywin is already starting to think about how does he cement his legacy and not it get destroyed like it ends up doing in A Feast for Crows. So maybe the option is you kill Joffrey. But I just think the way that it is done, the way in terms of would Tywin ever really kill Joffrey at a wedding in a position that just makes it really bad look on the Lannisters. That makes it feel vulnerable and things like that. I think if Tywin was going to kill Joffrey, it would be very different. Like it would be something that wouldn't like wouldn't be something so public where everyone sees it and it shows the Lannister weakness. So I just don't think that Tywin would have killed Joffrey. I think that he might have been contemplating it down the road. Again, we still have, a couple years here until Joffrey comes into his own age to rule. I think Tywin might have been thinking of that as an option down the road, but for now, he's probably thinking he can still try and mold Joffrey and teach him some lessons like he did with Tyrion. So let's then get into the second part of this. So now that I've kind of established, for me personally, I just don't think Tywin knew about the Purple Wedding happening or that he was orchestrating it. Could he have maybe inferred that people didn't like Joffrey and that maybe people might have attempted it? Yes, but could he have predicted how it was done? I just don't think so. So getting into the idea of Tyrion now. So Tyrion gets blamed for Joffrey's death. And the question is, does Tywin know? I think it's so weird because I feel like in the show, I think the answer to this question is actually different. I think that Tywin did know in the show. I think a lot of it just comes down to, I think the way the trial goes in the show, and also Tywin's last scene, his death scene in the show, I think just are slightly different. And I think it's because of Charles Dance's performance that make me feel like he understood what was going on the whole time and was just using the situation. Whereas I think, Tywin still uses the situation in the book, but I do think that Tywin genuinely thinks that Tyrion killed Joffrey. All the signs point to it, right? It's why it's almost the perfect framing job because think about it. One of the first early chapters where we see Tywin and Tyrion in A Storm of Swords, Tywin asks Tyrion about him threatening, Tommen and Myrcella and Joffrey and all of Cersei's kids, and Tyrion has to admit that, right? Now we know why he did those things in A Clash of Kings and all that stuff, but for Tywin, it's him threatening his own blood, right? So that's one part of it. The other part of it is Tywin just blindly hates Tyrion. That's just been something that's established, and a lot of it's because, well, one, Tyrion, when he was born, Joanna died, and so that was a really big influence on Tywin. All of his joy and happiness died at that moment. You also have the idea that Tyrion is the most like Tywin, and maybe Tywin sees a lot of his flaws in Tyrion and doesn't even want to admit to himself that Tyrion is really his true successor, not Jaime or Cersei. And so there's a lot of motivation here that the same things that apply for Cersei also apply to Tywin. That in a lot of ways, that even if Tywin doesn't believe that Tyrion is the person that did it, which I do think he is, because I think you go back to the same logic. If Tywin knows it's not Tyrion, why doesn't he go after anybody else? And maybe it's because Tyrion is the perfect fall guy, and maybe, Tywin is willing to allow Tyrion, to go to the wall or be killed, whatever, because then that allows Jaime to then become his heir, and it kind of fixes some things. But at the same time, you've now allowed somebody to target your family in front of the public that could easily try and poison you and keep doing this stuff. I just don't think that Tywin realizes that. I think one of the best parts about A Storm of Swords is Tywin is, outdone because of his blind hatred towards his son. And so I think that works really well. And so I think that when you look at Tywin and you look at other characters around Tywin, Kevin, somebody that I think is very intelligent, we see how he's able to rule. I don't think he was as good as, his brother Tywin at playing the Game of Thrones, but somebody that was still very intelligent. Even he was completely fooled by the evidence that was against Tyrion. He believed that Tyrion killed Joffrey. Even Jaime. Jaime is the closest person to Tyrion that we have. Even Jaime has doubt that Tyrion actually, might have done it. He even asked that, right? And Tyrion and Jaime's last kind of meeting, they talk about that, right? And so I sit here and you go, okay, if somebody like Jaime even doubts it, if somebody like Tywin, who already has all the motivation to believe that Tyrion did it, I think that Tywin genuinely believed that Tyrion killed Joffrey. And I think it's almost confirmation bias because not only do I think Tywin already would have believed it, I think that Tywin also saw the benefits of it. Not only is he going to believe it, but he's also going to get the benefits of it. Jaime's going to do some sort of deal to try and get Tyrion to not die while also becoming your heir. So now, again, the Lannister dynasty seems to be in a good spot. Jaime's going to marry somebody, and he's going to go rule Casterly Rock after Tywin's dead, all that stuff. The Tyrells, you kind of have two options. One of them, they're going to try to get Margaery to marry Tommen, which is completely fine because you need the Tyrell alliance, or maybe Margaery marries Jaime. Whatever you want to do with that situation, the Tyrell and Lannister alliance is still intact even after Joffrey dies. Joffrey himself was a horrible king. Tommen is a much more like, he's a good kid. He's somebody that can be molded through counsel and all of this stuff to, get the Lannisters into the next, the next generation, right? And you think about Tywin, he has a much longer time period with Tommen before Tommen comes of age, so he can get more done. He can set up more things so that Tommen is able to succeed. So in a lot of ways, everything is going perfect for Tywin, right? If, Tyrion had just rollen over and accepted this deal, right? If they hadn't pushed him as far as they did, bringing out Shay and bringing up all this slander and really like driving the nail into the coffin on Tyrion, then Tywin would have probably had the perfect outcome until Daenerys comes over. But like I said, Tywin had all the motivation to do these things or to allow them to happen and all this stuff, but I just don't think so. I think that Tywin and his pride for his, family's image and them never showing weakness, one, would never have allowed Joffrey to be killed or doing it himself. I don't think he also would have let somebody else run free for killing Joffrey. Now, we don't ever really know if Tywin maybe, and this is the other part of it, right? And if Tywin believed that Tyrion was innocent, how come in that last, scene that we get with Tywin and Tyrion, does Tywin not say that? Like that, oh yeah, I don't think you actually did it. Let's try and figure out who actually did it. Like there's none of that. And so there's no real indication that Tywin believes Tyrion didn't kill Joffrey. There's never any of that indication. And so, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think Tywin had any involvement in the Purple Wedding, in terms of executing it, knowing of its existence, or in Tyrion's trial? But let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.